What's going on, everyone? This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Travis Brown with MyAggieNation.com. We got the whole crew here, whole gang, full house. Start with Alex Miller of the Eagle. Alex, what's going on, man?
Not a lot. I got a haircut yesterday. If you're
Oh,
watching on the video.
isn't that special? We're kind of the black hoodie guys today, the professional black hoodie guys today. Zach Taylor, WTAW. How's it going, buddy?
Going good, man. And I'm keeping it colorful with a little pink polo today. So
Black and pink is kind of Valentine's-y, right?
yeah. I didn't even think about that. That works.
Okay, that's exactly what we were going for.
Some
Right.
people love, and some people just hate Valentine's Day with all their inner being.
Some people feel the same way about the A&M men's basketball team. Segue. It's been a little bit of a rough go. 7 losses for the A&M men's basketball team. Probably about 5 of those expected should have happened. Not a great one against Missouri. Not a great one against South Carolina. Zach, I'm curious. What's going on with this basketball team? Where do you think is the issue? Can they recover? What's the deal here?
Well, in a lot of those losses you mentioned, it came down to being able to finish. And you look at A&M's wins in SEC play when they started out 4-0, even those games, they had comfortable leads and things got real dicey down the stretch. And one or two even went into overtime. So I think that I wouldn't say that this is the team that we expected. I wouldn't say that the 4-0 team is what we expected. I think there's something kind of somewhere in the middle that what A&M really is. I think right now it is more in their heads than anything. And when you jump out to a 20-point deficit in the first half against LSU, 22-point deficit, but at the half that was 30.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So, I mean, at that point, you don't really have anybody to blame but your own self. I think if you're behind by that much, and we've talked about the football team, and you go back to the Ole Miss game, it just didn't seem like they were there for the first half. Now, that's not necessarily indicative of what this team has been made about all year, and they certainly fight, and they played a fantastic second half last night against LSU. But to answer your question, I don't really know exactly what's going on. I do know that they keep hearing those numbers add up over and over and over again, and I think that that's playing mentally in their minds. I think if they had been able to stop the streak at 2 or 3 games, that they probably would have won a couple by now.
Yeah, Buzz said after the game they should be embarrassed at this point before the ball's even tipped. Alex, what are you seeing from this team?
Yeah, kind of like what Zach said, they just can't finish. I mean, they're right there in a lot of these games. Tuesday's game, that was kind of an anomaly where they weren't really in it. But in a lot of these games, they're right there. They just can't seem to get that final nail in the coffin to put a bow on a win. And I think what's maybe hurting them is a lack of a big man. Henry Coleman's been great for A&M, but they're getting killed on the boards. I mean, in SEC play, I mean, they're getting out rebounded by about 3 rebounds a game. And I think that's something that Buzz had talked about in recent weeks. But as great as Henry Coleman's been, he's their only big presence really that's been able to do anything. It seems consistently on the boards. And when you're facing some of these teams with some really big guys, I mean, LSU's got some big guys. Missouri had some big guys. Kobe Brown was, fantastic for them in that win. For the Tigers. And then, you're going to face a team on Saturday in Auburn that, Jabari Smith is an incredible player and he's 6'10". A&M doesn't have a guy that can really match up that height necessarily. So, that's kind of a missing piece. The guard play hasn't been fantastic. And there's spurts of really good play that's just kind of overshadowed by not being able to finish, it seems.
So, I'll have a column coming out tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday. It'll be out Thursday. Kind of touching on this and the fact that I know there's a lot of people who are really upset with Buzz Williams and his staff for this. And some of that is merited, but I don't think all of it necessarily is merited. I think that You can argue that Buzz is what, the eighth highest paid coach in the country, and this is year 3. Pump the brakes on that. This isn't exactly year 3. People can argue all they want that technically it is, but year 1 was a team that they overachieved expectations because of Josh Nebo. You go to the SEC tournament with an outside chance that if somehow they make a little bit of a run, they might have could have snuck in to the NCAA tournament, but probably if it were a win or two away from getting into the NIT that year. And could have done some things in postseason year 1, but those got canceled because of COVID last year. I'm sorry, any level-headed administrator, barring any kind of real bad institutional dysfunction, is not going to hold last season against a coach. It's just not going to happen. There was too many variables, too many weird things going on. Williams, so that in essence, that really was kind of year 1 where he had a talent bear program that he was having to adjust to. So what did he do? He went to the transfer portal, and he, as my fiance made the great analogy of, he went to the white elephant exchange and went ahead and froze those presents. He locked them up. They have a one-time transfer. He got some young talent. He didn't go straight for guys that were the most seasoned, but only had a year or two. He gathered in some young talent who are now locked in. That provides some stability. So this is a growth process. When you look at the Henry Colemans, when you look at the Wade Taylors, those two guys have talent, and they have, if they continue to develop, have the ability to be game-changing players. And they're both freshmen right now, COVID freshmen. So I don't think the expectation this year was really necessarily all that high. Yeah, they started 15-2, but that was a hollow 15-2 because it was the worst Power 5 strength of schedule at that point in the country. And they didn't really play anybody. So when they started playing some people that actually were tough, these quad 1 teams, they were exposed a little bit for the inexperience and the immaturity that they had. I know a lot of people out there I've seen saying this is the worst basketball I've ever seen. Now, granted, the first half of that LSU game was pretty rough, but they came back and showed some gumption there in the second half to be able to kind of narrow that down, get it down to as few as 8 points in the second half. The pieces are there. Buzz Williams did what he needed to do over the offseason to start building this program through a reset. It's just going to need a little bit more time. And everyone got excited because of the start. It's just going to need a little bit more time. Now, that all being said, they notch a couple of wins here against Auburn or Tennessee, Alabama, win out the rest of the slate, maybe get an SEC here or there. Mathematically, they could still potentially be an NCAA tournament, but I don't see that happening. They still could have a shot at the NIT, and they said any kind of postseason would be growth this season, and I'd have to agree. But if you go back to the last 2 seasons, the last 3 seasons, really, A&M has been looked lost, and you kind of go, man, I don't see how they get out of this. Whereas to me, they're looking a little bit lost right now, but it seems very much like immaturity. When you are losing by mostly about an average of 6 points a game, you're right there. The program is right there. It just depends on development, and that will be the hallmark of Buzz Williams' tenure moving forward.
Yeah, and Buzz didn't get a chance to work with and see guys like Tamaro Miller come to fruition because they ended up transferring. So I think that there is some beef with that, with fans, and seeing had a pretty, I wouldn't say a mass exodus, but there are quite a few players that left in this past offseason. So those guys would have been in Buzz Williams' system yet another year, and that might have helped this team really come together. Now, he got some talented guys. What's that?
Oh, but I argue, did they really want any of those guys still in the program? Was there any, maybe save?
Did you want your leading
flag
and rebounder?
Okay, Emmanuel Miller was a little bit of a different thing because he went with the assistant coach. But the other guys, I mean, maybe Savion Flagg, but would you trade any of the guys that are on the team now for any of those guys that left other than Emmanuel Miller?
I mean, if it comes down to, did they spend another year and have they reached that maturity? I mean, you'd have to ask Buzz Williams that. If he would have been able, if he thought that he really could have won another year with those guys. Now, I think they lost two players that would have been in his system yet another year, and I think they would have provided a lot for this team. And I think they've got some talent, but going back to what Alex said, you need size, you need strength, and they just don't have a whole heck of a lot of that. And they are prone to running cold on offense. And they looked really good offensively at the beginning of SEC play. And there have been times where they have just gone straight cold. And the other thing that's really head scratching is the losses. Yes, they've had some close losses in there, but then getting blown out at home by South Carolina, getting blown out at home against LSU. It's kind of weird how that's all worked out, because they've actually played better on the road here lately than they have at home. Maybe y'all think differently. I don't know.
I think that had a little bit more to do with
LSU having some strength back.
They had their two best players out at Baton Rouge. They were back last night. I think that there's a little bit of it. You mentioned before, I think there was a little bit of a mental toll that's on this team now that's at 7 when they were at 3. They were at 2 heading into that first LSU game as far as the losing streak went. So I think that there's a little bit at play there. I think there is some stuff that Buzz Williams could be at fault at. There's 3 things I think that he could be at fault at: for not doing everything he could for getting Severe Wheeler in here before his first year here. He was committed here. The talk around was that Severe Wheeler was up at A&M's gym all through the summer, a Houston guy, because he was practicing. He knew the facilities back and forth because he was up there all the time. But now he's gone from Georgia to Kentucky and is thriving in Kentucky. Didn't keep Kobe Brown, a guy who was committed to Kennedy in that first year, and he's up at Missouri, and he's their best player right now. And he hasn't been able to find an impact 5, an impact center in his time, and he's already gone through 3. If you look at Marfo, Aku, and Javonte Brown, none of them have really developed or proven that they can really do it. Ethan Henderson defensively can be pretty good, but has really no offensive game. He needs to have an impact big in there that's a game changer to really make this system go. And I think those are 3 things that you can hold him at fault for. But as far as wondering and knowing if Buzz Williams and his staff are the answer yet, that is still about 2 years out on that. And he has the leeway of about 2 years on that. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah. I think y'all summed it up well. I mean, at least if you're A&M, you're kind of wondering, all right, does the bleeding ever stop? I mean, that's just kind of the question. And you kind of don't expect it to this Saturday when they play number 1 Auburn on the road. I know Auburn lost last night to Arkansas in overtime. But, from there's actually a few winnable games. Florida's kind of a middle tier team. Vanderbilt on the road might be tricky, but they're kind of in the middle tier. And then, A&M's got Georgia and Ole Miss. They've beaten those teams. If somehow A&M could maybe get on a 4-game winning streak heading into that road game at Alabama, I mean, Alabama's been a really streaky team that's played up to really good teams and played down to teams that they probably should have beat. I mean, that's a game that A&M could win. If somehow you could, by God's grace, win 6 games getting into the SEC tournament, I mean, A&M could certainly jockey themselves into, some kind of postseason bid, and, kind of put a 180 on what's kind of just been a letdown of a season after a relatively strong start per se. All circumstances given, with the kind of a weaker non-conference schedule, at least.
I always worth mentioning, and granted, I'll preface this by saying that no, by no means do I think A&M will make the NCAA tournament. I think that they should be shooting for, and a target would be the NIT, but that's going to be a pretty tough question as it is too. That all being said, you have to remember 2016, they lost 7 in a row before making to the NCAA tournament, and in 2018 they lost 5 in a row, I believe. So that the losing streaks don't necessarily mean anything until you see them in the context of the whole season. So with that being said, Zach, you ready for some baseball?
Yes. It's been great weather too. So I think that's part of it whenever it kind of actually feels like spring outside. So you're like, okay, it's baseball time.
Well, it hasn't
Baseball
really been
time in
great
Aggie
weather.
Land.
They've had some ice and sleet to deal
Today
with leading up.
and
But
yesterday were very, very nice days.
You're right. Well, but you do know it's kind of getting to be baseball season when it actually does get really cold here because, like before Christmas here, it was like 70 on Christmas here, wasn't it? So Christmas time isn't really the cold time. When it actually starts getting cold and there's freezing warnings, that baseball practice is about ready to get gearing up. And it's Jim Schlossnagle's first year at the helm of the Aggies here at Bluebell Park. Real quick, because we're going to talk to Coach Schlossnagle next after this. What's your initial take on this baseball team? What's the ceiling for Jim Schlossnagle's first season?
Well, certainly people are going to be expecting a postseason run. I don't know if College World Series is necessarily going to be on there, but if the Aggies are able to somehow host a regional again, I think there would be lots of folks around here that are excited about that. And so, I think this is a postseason team. To see Schlossnagle in action and everything that he's put together, he's certainly been recruiting a heck of a class. So, we'll see what that plays into as far as next year goes. But I think that they're going to have a decent team. I don't know if I don't think that they're necessarily an Oklahoma or not an Oklahoma, but an Omaha bound team. But I think they'll be pretty solid.
Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if A&M can get back to the NCAA tournament, just get to a regional, I think that'd be considered a success. I mean, it's definitely been a transition period when you consider everything that A&M lost, and there was some talent on that last year's team, but it certainly wasn't good enough to make the postseason, and clearly because A&M missed it. So this is definitely kind of in a rebuilding phase. There seems to be a lot of young talent, whether that's that incoming freshman class or just some transfers. We'll see if guys like Dylan Rock or Micah Dallas can actually make the impact of kind of what people have been saying. They're capable of. Troy Claunch, I see. He's a graduate transfer from Oregon State. I'm just curious how big of an impact some of these transfer guys can make, and can A&M kind of weather the storm of this transition period and make something successful out of this first season under Schlossnagle.
It'll be interesting. You mentioned some names there: Troy Claunch, you have Cole Kalar, and you have Jack Moss over at first base. Three guys that D1 baseball selected as some of the top guys at their position in the year. I think defensively, I think offensively, they're going to be a pretty good team. The biggest question mark, what's going to depend on if they are a deep postseason team or just a postseason team, is going to be the pitching, because you're going to have your basically potentially your ace be Nathan Detmer, a guy who was a midweek guy last year who had a great season at Savannah this past summer, and then leaning on the transfer Micah Dallas too, for one of those two guys to be the Friday and Saturday guys, and then a whole lot of question marks after that. Some guys with some experience. You have Moo Menifee, you have Jonathan Childress back there. You have some guys who transferred in, but I think the biggest question mark is going to be pitching and see how consistent that is going to be for the Aggies in their first year. Well, let's get right into it and preview that season. We talked to new head coach Jim Schlossnagle leading up to that big series opening weekend, and we'll hear that after this.